So how many people are on Twitter? Raise your hand. A few. So hashtag FMRS 2013. We are going to start a peaceful democratic revolution by the end of this panel. But you have to be on Twitter to do it. This session is about regulation, and I thought I would talk a little bit about justice. And a lot of us in the free market movement, particularly those economists in the room, talk a lot about regulation in the context of economic efficiency. We're going to show you charts and graphs and likely bore you to tears with the logic of not regulating too much in the private economy. And of course the other side, the progressives, those that have this idealistic and we would argue fantastic view of government, talk about justice. They talk about social justice, and it's always a poorly defined term, but I thought I would define justice based on what one of my favorite moral philosophers, Adam Smith, talked about. And Adam Smith, in his book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, argued this: the most sacred laws of justice, those whose violations seem to call loudest for vengeance and punishment, are the laws which guard the life and person of our neighbor. The next are those which guard his property and possessions, and last of all come those which guard what is due to him from the promises of others. Now this is Old English, but in America we translate this quite simply. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, and do what you said you were going to do. Can we all agree that those are probably good rules to live by? Not that complicated, not that deep, but this is how we operate. And you think about how this conference came together today. You have all of these organizations, you have people from different continents, you have people speaking different languages, and yet, so far at least, nobody's hurt, nobody's taken each other's stuff, and everybody's kept their commitments. I was only 5 minutes late, and I'm claiming that that was a commitment kept. The Liberty Fund, by the way, shameless advertisement. If you want to read the 600-page version of what I just quoted from Adam Smith, you can do so outside, and I highly recommend it. So when we talk about protecting life, liberty, and property, and we talk about the rule of law, we talk about the sacredness of contracts between people, we always talk about it in the context of economic efficiency. And the other side loves to talk about things in terms of justice. And they come up with fantasies about what government regulators and politicians might do to better organize society based on whatever a real or perceived problem is. And those of us from a classical liberal tradition, those of us that understand economics and how voluntary association works and how people come together to solve problems, always argue that government can't do these things. Government fails as much, if not more, than markets sometimes fail. And we're not talking about an idealized state here. We understand that sometimes people do hurt other people. Sometimes people do take other people's stuff. And quite often people break the promises that they commit. That happens in business. But we would argue that sometimes that happens in government as well. And there's two presumptions when you get to this notion of rearranging society, rearranging the economy, trying to change the behavior of consumers and workers and businessmen. There's two problems that government faces. Even the best intended public policies struggle because it is always true that no individual in any economic system knows everything. And that again seems like common sense. We all know that most of what we think we know, we don't know. Unless you're in government. If you're in charge of a regulatory agency, if you're a politician at at the stump, talking about what you're going to do to fix a problem, there is a presumption of knowledge, an almost arrogant presumption that you could, in a committee, in an agency, come together and decide based on a better set of facts, a better set of assumptions, what we all should be doing. And Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian economist, talked about this as the knowledge problem. Whenever you come together and try to reorganize things beyond those basic rules of property rights and respect for life and respect for contract, you run into an inability to know the most important facts that would allow for you to rearrange things other than they are today. And this is a ubiquitous problem. This is why the market process is so important. This is why the push and pull between consumers and producers, businessmen, everybody in life is so important, because we don't know what the best outcome is until people decide. It's all based on choices. It's based on all of that personal knowledge that each of us has as an individual coming together and trying to solve a problem. Everybody is here in this room today for a different reason, and I wouldn't presume to know why you came here today. But I know through voluntary association, even with the barriers of language and culture, the various interests of all the institutes that have come together to do this, somehow we came to a resolution that works for all of us. Imagine if a government agency came in here and tried to rearrange things. It might not work out so well. I think a bigger problem, and one that is probably easier to understand, is the incentive problem that government officials have. For some reason, all of macroeconomic policy, starting with Marx all the way through John Maynard Keynes, makes what I believe is the most naive assumption in all of public policy, that the moment that you leave personal space, where we all know that we're all self-interested, we all know that we work hard for our families, we strive to make a better life for ourselves and for our children. But if somehow we are elected to public office, if somehow we are given the power of a regulatory agency, we leave all those self-interests behind. It's not possible, based on modern macroeconomic policy assumptions, that any public official would have personal interests. They only have your interests in mind, right? Does anyone believe that? Is it possible that humans could leave their self-interests behind when they take public office, when they are put in charge of redesigning labor markets? No, it's not possible. And this, of course, is the whole insight of public choice economics, that just like the rest of us, those in charge of making government decisions are self-interested. It's not saying that they're bad people any more than you and I are. It's saying that they have incentives to do things that may be in their interest instead of your interest. So whenever you hear them talking about social justice, talking about what's better for society, understand that they have an agenda as well. And this, of course, is the great critique of the regulatory state, that quite often the stated purposes in the context of social justice are really about something else. Maybe it's as simple as building the budgets of the government. Maybe it's as simple as securing the jobs of the regulators in charge of making sure that labor markets do certain things. Maybe it's the interests of special interests, including large businessmen, who would like to use regulation to crowd out their competitors. It's important to understand the limits of regulation. When we look at the failures of the market, at the things that the market is doing that maybe we wish it would do better, to understand that if there is market failure, there is certainly government failure as well. And struggling with that balance is what we're talking about today. I think that's the challenge that we have as people that believe in freedom. We need to move beyond this argument of economic efficiency and talk about justice in the context of how it is that free people come together and solve problems. And we always put up our charts and graphs, and we try to explain things in terms of the potential. What if we did free up capital? What if we did free up competition so that the big corporations weren't able to crowd out the small businesses that could free up the Lithuanian economy? I think we should talk about it instead of in terms of the opportunities crushed and the special interests that collude, the insiders that inevitably collect within the government, the insiders that may be corporations like General Electric. It's not the case that the insiders have our best interests at heart, and all of us on the outside, whether we be businessmen or consumers, are seeking that greedy self-interest that we all rail so much against. I think it may be the exact opposite, because there's a discipline on our behavior. There's a limit to what we can do. We can't hurt other people. We can't take their stuff. We can't not keep our contractual commitments, otherwise we go to jail. Government sometimes is not subject to those same constraints, and I think that's the challenge we have today. How do you limit that? How do you impose accountability on government so that it sticks to those basic functions? How do you keep it so that it protects life, protects property, protects contracts? It's always been the challenge, and we know that governments naturally grow. They naturally expand their reach beyond what we set them out to do because they are as self-interested as I described. But things are different today. If you think about the internet world that we live in, you think about the ability of us as individual consumers to express in real time on Twitter, on Facebook, our opinions about everything from Lady Gaga to our politicians, to whether or not GE should be held accountable for something it did or didn't do. Shifts the playing field. It takes power away from the insiders who are colluding to fix the rules of the game to help them at the expense of new businesses, at the expense of new workers that want to enter the market, and shifts that power to us. We're now allowed to have an opinion about Lady Gaga, and we do in real time, and she has to respond to that. In the United States, we have millions and millions of people who are holding politicians accountable in a way that they couldn't have conceived of 10 years ago because of the internet, because of Twitter, because of Facebook. And it looks a lot like those of you who have ever read Friedrich Hayek when he talks about the market process and how it is that individuals coordinate their various personal knowledge, their desires, their wants, their strivings, their failings, all these things that we know personally. Hayek argued that there was literally a telecommunication system that emerged spontaneously through markets, through prices, through that push and pull every time we made a purchase, every time we showed up for work. All of that reflected what one of my professors called a greater social intelligence about the world. This was, of course, before the internet. Adam Smith was never on Facebook. He did not have a Twitter account. But he certainly understood how these things could come together. And I happen to be a radical optimist about the future, in large part because of the democratization and the liberalization of information and knowledge, and the way that we can do an end run around top-down institutions, whether it be government or businesses or anyone that used to try to tell us what to do in a hierarchical structure. Now we can organize for ourselves, which is why I suggested the hashtag. I would suggest that everybody that's on Twitter here today tweet something out, Free Market Roadshow 2013. And you can immediately connect over the next weeks with every attendee who does the same thing in every country that we visit. And you can start organizing, and you can start talking about ideas, and you can start working to develop a constituency for freedom that didn't exist 10 years ago. I don't think this group could have existed 10 years ago because of the problems of finding out where people that thought like you, who were trying to solve the same problems as you were. It just didn't happen. I see this in every country that I travel to. I see this in the United States. I've seen it in Europe. I've seen it everywhere. People are organizing. People have better information. People have an ability to know what's going on inside the cloistered walls of government. And this is an opportunity for those of us that believe in freedom, those of us that want to see better economic opportunity, and those of us that want to challenge the most bureaucratic, closed systems like the European Union. These are opportunities that we have. And I see a lot of young people in the audience, and I would just close with this. It's a depressing story because it lets you all know exactly how old I am. I discovered freedom from reading the liner notes on a vinyl rock album. And it wasn't a kitschy, oh, let's play vinyl again. This was the first time that vinyl came out. And there's a band called Rush, and they dedicate an album to Ayn Rand. And I'm 14, 15 years old. I have no idea who Ayn Rand is, but I thought it was a really cool album. So I happened to stumble across an Ayn Rand novel at a used bookstore. I pick it up, I read that, I devour it, I buy the rest of them. She recommends that those who believe in freedom and want to understand economics read Ludwig von Mises. So as a strange young man, I pick up Human Action. Horrible way to get a date in high school, by the way. And I discovered these ideas by accident. You guys don't need to do that. One Google search, and you can develop an entire curriculum that is not dependent on your professors, it's not dependent on the local newspaper, it's not dependent on anything that is said in this room today. You guys can define that curriculum for yourselves. This is an opportunity to change the world. This is an opportunity for freedom, and I hope you'll join me. This is a big opportunity. Thank you.